Welcome everyone to Textiles and Tea by the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the Advertising and Marketing Manager, and I get to be your host today. Today's sponsor of Textiles and Tea is Schiffer Books. They're doing this wonderful thing with all of their sponsorships. They're giving away 2 books of the author. And so today we will have in the chat the link you need to click on and go to their website and fill out the form to be in the drawing. And they're going to do 2 of her books. And who am I talking about? We're talking about Micala Sidore. We'll have questions later today. Of course, the last 15 minutes. So please put your questions in the chat. I mean, in the Q&A and not in the chat. Micala first studied weaving in 1973. She completed her first tapestry in 1979, and between 1989 and 87, she interned at the French State Tapestry Studio. Her solo exhibit of tapestries was in 1984. She's had 4 other one-person shows and participated in many group exhibits in the US, Australia, Austria, China, and Poland. In 1987, Micala established the Hawley Street Tapestry Studio. Her first article, Impressions of a European Trip, was published in 1989 and was in the German quarterly Textilforum. And she has written over 45 articles since then in periodicals throughout the United States, Germany, Holland, and Australia. In 91, she began the series Black plus White plus Red All Over. And in 1998, she showed them as a unit, first in Poland, that was when she was 19, and now at 68, Micala curated a traveling exhibit called The Art is the Cloth, and in 2020, Schiffer Book published her book by the same name. We are so excited to have you here today, Micala. Hello.
Hello, Kathy. Kathy, I have to tell you my last name has 2 syllables, not 3. It's Sidore. I'm sorry, I should have gone over that.
Okay,
so
thank you.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
I'm so sorry. I've been saying Sidora forever.
Yep, Sidore. 2 syllables.
Sidore, thank you for letting me know.
Sure.
So what is your favorite tea?
My favorite tea is Bengal Spice. It's one of the teas that Celestial Seasoning makes.
Oh, that's a great tea. That's one of my husband's favorites.
Yeah.
So how did you get started in fiber?
I think I was born into it. My family ran a knitting factory. And I was once told that I had yarn in my veins. And so that may be where it all begins. My grandmother crocheted Afghans. My mother crocheted an Afghan to prove that she could. My father and mother knit ski socks for me and my siblings. My father was probably the only chief executive of a knitting factory who actually knew how to knit. So I think those things all contributed to fiber being something that I liked and that I was fascinated by.
Well, that's neat about your father. That's great.
Yeah, there's a photograph. His favorite photograph of himself was for an advertising campaign for a particular yarn made by a particular company, and it shows him in a rocking chair knitting. And they did it with a bunch of executives from a bunch of companies, but the only woman they showed knew how to knit. My father knew how to knit, and the other executives are sitting there just certain about what they're doing.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Wow.
So we're going to show some images from your series called Black plus White plus Red All Over. Would you explain how you chose that theme and what it means to you? A little bit more about that, would you?
I'm trying to think of how to begin. I was weaving tapestries, and I felt that I knew that I could rely on my sense of color and that it was an out. It was a very easy thing for me to think about color. And I wanted to challenge myself to do something different. And so I began to think that if I reduce the number of hues that I used in any particular piece, then that might present a challenge that would be useful to me. And so I wove 2 little pieces that were black and white and red. And then I wove another piece that was black and white and red. And then I wove a piece that was not just about black and white and red, but had words in it that actually went somewhere. And I thought I may be onto a series. And so that's where it came from. And it's also true that one of the first jokes that kids ever learn is what's black and white and red all over. And I now have 4 versions of that in mind. And someday I'll do tapestries about those.
Well, I love the crossword puzzle because if folks take a look at it, the red is in place of a word, and then it makes more words. I love that. That's great.
Well,
Very
my
cool.
mom did crossword puzzles all the time. And so it occurred to me that it would be fun to do a crossword puzzle. And in the crossword puzzles, it often includes a clue in the name of the puzzle as to
Mhm.
what the largest answers are. And the name of the puzzle is Where is Red Square, which was the only sentence I remembered from a trip I took to Moscow in 1967. And so where is Red Square? And there it is throughout the crossword puzzle. That was probably the hardest part of the weaving, which was coming up with the design and making sure that things actually worked together, and then making sure that all the letters got in the right places.
I love that. Was Helen Reddy and Sacred. I guess I never thought how often red shows up in a word. It's wonderful. Well, you also create works outside of red and black. So do you find it's hard to switch back and forth to really focus just on those colors and then go into the wide color?
No,
We have this beautiful piece here called Leaf Heart.
it is not difficult for me to go back and forth. It just depends on what the piece is that I'm making. And for this particular piece, these were the colors that made sense to me. It was a commission. And so I talked with the people who had asked for it, and I made a sampler and I showed them what the colors would look like, and they thought that was fine. And then I made the piece. I love color, so it's just great fun for me to work with it.
Well, let's talk some about your internship in Paris. I guess I wanted to start with all kinds of questions, like how did you decide that you wanted to go to Paris? How did that all come about that you got this incredible internship?
Well, it turns out that tapestry weaving, as tapestry weavers know, is very isolated. And I began to think that I wanted to connect more with other people who were weaving tapestries. And then this, then this, then this. And then I wrote a letter to Sylvia Hayden, and I asked her, based upon an article I had seen about her, if she ever took on apprentices, and she said no. She also said that where she had studied in Zurich, the people were no longer there. But she knew someone who had studied in Paris, and that might be of interest to me. And that person led me to a person. So I wrote a letter to ask if it was possible for me to be an intern at the studio. I didn't speak French, but my next door neighbor was from Paris, so she helped me. And they said yes. And I had written a very obsequious letter because I had the impression that they were very difficult and demanding, and it was going to be hard. And they were not even remotely difficult about the whole thing. They had set up an intern program for people from anywhere. And people in France said, "Are they paying you?" And people in the United States said, "What are you paying?" And the entire thing was free, but I had to take care of my own housing and all of that other stuff. But they were happy to do it. They ran that program between the late 70s and I would say the mid 90s. And I actually went back once in 2002 and was there for another 3 months. There was something else I was curious about.
So at that time, had you been studying weaving elsewhere?
Yep. Whenever
Okay.
I could, I took workshops and talked with people about what they were doing and went to conferences. And it's a very interesting process, meeting other people who are working in the field that you're working in, when that it's a field that is as little known as tapestry is. Because I think you automatically feel a sense of connection and community with other people working in the same medium.
I'm just impressed by your bravery. I keep thinking, I don't know that I would have the
I love to travel.
Okay.
And luckily, it turns out, one could never know these things. I learn other languages pretty easily. And so both of those things just worked on my behalf. And it seemed to me the next logical thing to do, no matter how nervous I was. And it wasn't that I was not nervous, because I was, but it was also just really interesting. And I wanted to know more about it. And I liked the people at the studio, and I liked the feeling of living outside of the United States. It was all very interesting.
So how do you think it impacted on your work? Either the direction you went at the time or your overall work?
Well, the man who ran my studio was a man named Jacques Postel, and he was a remarkable person in a lot of ways. And the thing that he used to talk about all the time when he was looking at what you were doing or looking at what was being done was the French phrase, que ça soit joli, which means that it be beautiful. And when I first heard him say that, it seemed to me very arbitrary, and that there was probably an exact formula that meant this was beautiful, that was not beautiful. But over time, it became clear to me that it was a matter of instinct and experience. And the longer that I was exposed to the aesthetic within that studio and the tapestries that I could see all over Europe, the more I understood that it was something I was learning that was a sensibility to what I was seeing. And that was what it meant when you asked things, when you said that things needed to be beautiful.
Oh.
So that's how it worked.
So, what did you, I'm not sure about internships. What did you actually do in the internship? Did they say, we want this done, and you went and did it? Or was it more of a teaching for you? Or
It was, the teaching was in the doing, and they would come over and tell you that it was either pas mal, which meant not bad, or pas terrible, which meant not awful. And the difference between the two is a real difference. Yes, exactly. But Jacques and his colleagues would figure out what needed to be done. And I had been there for 3 months, gone home, prepared work for an exhibit, come back and showed him what I'd been doing. And he looked and he said, those are not beautiful lines. We need to teach you how to make beautiful lines. So he gave me something to work on. And then the next time I came back, he gave me a different thing to work on. And these were details from the cartoons that they had wandering around the studio, pieces that had been made at the studio. And they tended to make 3 of any particular cartoon that they were weaving. One would go into storage, one would be used in some public place, like an ambassador's home or something like that, ambassador's office. And one would be put on exhibition somewhere.
oh,
And that was how they did things. And Jacques and the others would figure out the thing that needed to be done. And then they tell you that you needed to do it. And that doing it included picking the yarns and making a sampler and learning all of the very technical techniques that they had to teach as best you could, you know, and sometimes I felt I was getting something and sometimes I felt that I was a complete failure. And it was very helpful to be around people who were as straightforward as they were about what they saw. You know, yes, that works. No, you know, absolutely not. And Jacques used to say, if you don't get it after the 3rd time, just keep weaving. So that was helpful too. That was a good rule of thumb.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, is this program still in place?
I
Do you
don't
know?
think so. I don't think so.
Okay.
I would say that when I was there in 2002, it was probably the last time they did it. But for all I know, they've done something like that. But it doesn't seem as though that is something that they're doing anymore. It used to be, I think they felt that this was a way to spread French culture.
Mhm.
The French tapestry studios, as well as the French porcelain studios, Sèvres, are both part of what's called the Ministry of Culture. Just as we have a State Department, they have a culture department that's now culture and education. And I think that they felt that this was a way of showing people the nature of French culture that could be spread throughout the world and would give it greater credibility and importance in people's lives. And certainly any of us who studied there felt that this was a very important, interesting thing, and that we were lucky, amazingly lucky.
It
So
sounds wonderful.
it was really
Oh, I'm
great.
so jealous. It sounds wonderful. Well, let's shift gears a little bit because I want to talk about your wonderful book. It's called The Art is the Cloth, and we have a picture of the book here. Can you start off by just saying, how did you decide to write a book? Because there's a whole history to this, right?
Yes, there is. I wrote an article for Shuttle, Spindle, and Die Pot in the 1990s about Helena Hernmark. And one day she sent me a fax, and the fax read, "The Art is the Cloth." And that was the name of the article that I wrote. And over time, I began to realize that that had been like a direction for me, a directive. Why don't you think about things this way? What do you think about these things? And that was very helpful. And so I began to organize the talks that I gave around that idea and what I thought it meant. And then I had a one-woman show at the New Hampshire Institute of Art. And about 3 or 4 years later, they asked me if I wanted to have another one. They don't have a textile program, but they thought it was a good idea to have textiles, have the students who were in the arts exposed to textiles. And I said, actually, I've just had a show, because I just had a show in Poland. I said, what I really want to do is curate a show. And so I put together an exhibit with about 60 tapestry weavers from the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and then had the show there, and it traveled to 2 other venues. And then I thought, there's a lot more here. I mean, I'd figured out areas in which tapestry looked like cloth, and those were the areas in which people's work were organized in the show itself. But I thought, I think I have more to say about this. And so I made a proposal to Schiffer, essentially, and Schiffer said, sure. And so I came up with a more comprehensive idea about Artist the Cloth. And I also began to think about where else I could get images, because getting work was one thing, but if you just had to deal with images, it was a lot easier in a number of ways, because you didn't have to worry about, was the tapestry going to get back to the place that you got it from? And then I also had an extraordinary thing happen, which began with a bad thing. My mom died. She died 2 days before her 101st birthday. And yet she died on March 4th, which in her mind is a piece of direction to everybody, which is March 4th. And so I learned that she had put money aside in her will. So I'm the youngest of 3 million, and she had left money so that each of us could, once a year until the money ran out, which it did, take a certain amount of money to do something that was not paying the mortgage and was not buying groceries. And so I used the money to travel to other places and see what people were doing. And that was an extraordinary gift to me. And it meant that I could include work that I had known about, but had not seen in any quantity, or that I wanted to see in person, or any number of other things. And so all those together made the book work for me, because I knew I could show worldwide what was going on in tapestry in a way that the original exhibition had not. So that's how that all happened.
Well, the book is just a wonderful combination of like a coffee table book, because the images are glorious, and it's, you know, all different kinds of weavers, but there's more information to it. Huh?
If the images are glorious, that full credit for that goes to my beloved Stan Shearer, who lives here in Northampton and who's a photographer and an expert when it comes to dealing with digital images. Schiffer did a great job. I'm not underplaying them, but Stan is the one who made sure that everything was up to snuff. And people talk about the images, and I say, talk to Stan. Stan's the one who made sure. So,
well, but the rest of that thought is that you chose such wonderful pieces and different artists, and you just can't, I can't get over the fact that tapestry can be so different, you know, no matter, even though it's all tapestry, they're also beautifully different. It's amazing, amazing book. And when I was looking through it, I was thinking again about how many different artists there were from all over the world. How did you find them all? And were there any surprises for you? Did you come across something that really just kind of surprised you?
What surprised me, and shouldn't have, is that tapestry weavers are very generous people. And so they were all perfectly happy to help me in any way that they could. What surprised me, I wasn't looking for artists specifically. I had seen work that I knew needed to be included in the book, and then I could ask people to show me more of their images in case there was something else. I was looking at work that would suit the areas that I thought were most illustrative of art being cloth. So with that in mind, I would be talking with people and I'd be saying, you know, I'm thinking that this might be a really good thing. Do you have another idea? I remember saying to one person, I think that your work belongs in this chapter. And she said, I don't understand why. And so I began to explain it. And then she began to understand what I was talking about. It's my idea. It's not their idea, but people were just constantly generous and thoughtful and gave suggestions. And I once wrote a long email to a friend of mine who has since died, who lived in Hungary, Iboya Hedji. She's in the book. And I told her what I was thinking about. And she responded by saying, well, you know, if you're thinking about this, I think you should think about these tapestry weavers. And that was splendid. You know, those were the kinds of things. I show up in Edinburgh, Scotland, and Joanna Soroka, who's in the book, has a dinner party so that I can meet other tapestry weavers in Edinburgh that I've not met before, things like that. You know, it's just really quite wonderful. So it was a very exciting, wonderful experience. And when I dedicate the book, I dedicate it to my beloved Bill, but I also dedicate it to the weavers who have been unfailingly generous and thoughtful and full of ideas and make such extraordinary work. I mean, it's not difficult to find beautiful tapestries. I was looking for tapestries that suit my ideas and I found them. And that's all I can say.
It really does sound like a wonderful community of people, no matter where they were. It was this community of people.
I felt that. I
How
do
lovely.
feel that. Yeah.
That's great. Let's talk some more about your work. And we've got these two images that are coming up. One is trees and the other is called Blue Moon. And I was so struck by the energy and the direction of your work. Can you talk some about how strong these are? And was that a conscious decision on your part?
All I can tell you is that the vertical parts of the piece on the left, which is Blue Moon, so the parts that seem to be sort of white, that is the only part of that that I drew out. And the rest of it, I just wove as I considered what colors I might be using. And when it was done, I realized what the title was. But it also took me, if I remember right, it's 32 by 44 inches. And it took me 3 days to weave because something happened and I just caught fire and I knew that that was the thing I wanted to do. The piece on the right is called Trees. And the difficulty in that piece is making sure that the tree that you start in green continues to be green as you go up the branches. And if you go under another branch, then you need to make sure that the branch that you've gone under is not going to be green again. So it was just making sure that there was consistency. I remember marking the cartoon, again, just the shapes of the trees to make sure that I would not make a mistake. I once saw a tapestry somebody wove that was a group of horses running, and she forgot one of the stomachs because horses were on top of each other. And I was very sympathetic to that and thought of that a lot when I was working on this piece. So I liked making these pieces.
Well, then let me kind of jump ahead to a question, which is, so how do you design? It sounds like you do use a cartoon at least some of the time, right? Or do you ever just weave whatever strikes you as you go?
There are some pieces that I have to design ahead of time because they're based upon something that either needs organization like those trees did. I couldn't have done that without planning that ahead of time. Or there's a black and white and red all over that is the masthead of a newspaper, and it wouldn't do me any good to just free associate that one because the masthead looks a particular way. So I made sure that I had the shape of the letters right for that particular masthead. But then there are also things that happen where I just start weaving and I'm thinking, okay, what's going to happen if? And I just weave and weave and weave, and then things start happening. And I find both of those things very, very interesting. I have, as I said, made samplers to make sure that the colors I want to use have something to say to each other, more than just And I also just do outlines of things and see what happens when I'm in the process of the actual weaving.
Now, do you do a smaller loom to do your samples, or do you do that on a regular loom?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I just, you know, I just, if I have a warp set up, then I weave it, you know, so things happen. I know that Susan Martin Maffei often sets up warps and then just weaves what occurs to her. I don't think that that's entirely fair, and she would probably dispute some of what I'm saying, but that's an impression that I have, that she lets the warp talk to her and then she talks back by filling in the weft. And I feel that I do some of that as well.
Oh, okay. Well, you're also a writer. You've written a great deal, as we talked about at the beginning of the program, and you started out as with a writing degree, did you not?
Yeah, but my writing degree was it was a Master of Fine Arts in Writing for a translation. I'm the only
really?
in that program who ever got an MFA for a translation. So
Ah.
it is not necessarily a relationship between translating a German play and writing nonfiction, so.
Well, I was looking at some of your works and I thought about these two pieces, the word autumn,
Yes.
and better dead than. And I was thinking about how you tell a story in your work. Sometimes it's subtle, like the autumn leaves, you kind of see the hand there. It makes you start thinking, what is this? And then there's some things that are very direct, like better dead than. So where does this come from for you? Where do you think your story comes in on your pieces?
It is true that I love to tell stories. And it is true that I grew up in a family of people who love to tell stories. But it is also true that I would say that my work is not so much about telling stories, or not that much, as it is about having a good time. Now, the word autumn, if you look carefully, actually has two hands in it. And it is based upon a series of poems about Helen Keller that were written by Liesl Mueller, who had been my advisor when I did the translation in graduate school. And so this is Helen, just trying to figure out about how to understand a world that she can neither see nor hear. And so that's where the idea came from. The better dead than, I was just having a good time. I was making the black and white and red all over pieces, for me, is about just thinking of something that is going to involve those three colors or not, or something that I thought was interesting, or something that I thought was silly, or something that got my attention for some reason, and then pursuing it and seeing what comes of it.
Well, you're also very talented in a variety of ways. You're kind of a Renaissance woman. You also designed a travel loom. Can you talk some about how you came up with the travel loom? Why a travel loom, and how did you design it?
Well, it's actually a very simple design, because tapestry is two sheds, the odd and the even. And there are many tapestry looms which are based upon the frame, which is what you see in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that's going on with tapestry is that you want to be able to adjust the tension, so that there are a number of frame looms in which you can adjust the tension, which is what's going on near the top of that image, where you see those sort of larger things that are like nuts fitting around bolts. The idea that I had was not the loom, because there are a lot of looms like this, but about the weight of the loom. And I have a cousin who's involved with composite materials. And when I described to him what I was trying to do, he said, "You want to work with fiberglass." So this is a loom that can be taken apart, put into a tube, and slung across your back, and it weighs less than 10 pounds. And yet it's 22 by about 36 inches, although it depends on how open you have it, how much you have decreased or increased the length of the threaded rod, which is at the very top on the left and the right. But my idea was not so much about the frame. As I say, that's common, but it was more about the materials and the fact that people could then use it to go to workshops. And when they were finished with the workshop, they could take it apart, roll it up with the warp and the weaving in place, put it back into the tube, and take it home and work on it some more.
Wow. Are these still available?
Sort of. I have a bunch in my basement. What's not so available are the legs. And the legs have a piece that fits around the edges of the vertical parts. But the frames are pretty available, and they can be used with C-clamps to hold them in place. The advantage of the legs is that as you're working up the warp, you either have to make yourself higher, or you have to make the loom itself lower. And so the legs permit you to make the loom lower.
So what's next for you?
Well, I've been thinking about this. I have an idea for another book,
Oh, good.
and it would be a book in which I focus on technical matters and show people what happens when you do this particular thing. Here are the possible outcomes. Because I've been looking at people's work for a long time, and I see all kinds of things going on. And I think that it is helpful to the people who know nothing about tapestry, once again, to see a huge range of things that are available. And for the people who are tapestry weavers, it's helpful to say, you know, if you try to do just this one thing, look at the possibilities that are available to you. Look what you could make. Look what could happen. And so that's the book I'm thinking about now. And I've begun looking at tapestries and at people's work and thinking, I wonder if I can use this.
Oh,
So,
good. That's wonderful.
yeah, so we'll see what happens.
Tapestry is so popular right now too. It's
I'm
just
very pleased.
going
with
strong. Yeah.
it. Yes, I'm pleased. I'm pleased. I'm pleased.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why don't we ask some questions? Let's get some questions from the audience. How about that?
That sounds fine.
Okay. Let's see. We've got from Andrea Thiessen. So where was the internship in Paris? Are they still in business? We already asked that. And she said, where would you recommend if somebody did want to get an internship?
I don't know what to tell you. I actually would be in touch with tapestry weavers and see anybody whose work you admire. A tapestry weaver, I can just imagine, would love getting a letter saying, I so admire your work. Is there any way that I can study with you? And that might be a way to begin to find out about an internship. I did not go to Paris the first time I went overseas to study tapestry. I found something called the Association of British Craftsmen, ABC, and that was where I met Pat Johns, because she was the first person that I studied with over there, and I stayed 2 weeks at her house, and we have been friends ever since. But that enabled me, during that visit, I got to go to Paris and to hang out at the studio for a minute, because they already told me that I was going to come. And I said, no, I'm not starting now. I'll be here in a year. I got to see the tapestries being woven at Westine. They were a series of tapestries designed by Henry Moore that were being woven at the studio. I got to find the book that is about the Dovecot Studios that came out of an exhibit that they had at the Victoria and Albert. And I got to meet up with a bunch of tapestry weavers. And those things, I mean, the number of people who are involved in tapestry are accessible. People have web pages, people have organizations. I'm part of the Tapestry Weavers in New England. We are always welcoming people in. And that's another way to find out about people's work. They have meetings. I have not been going to the meetings, but at their meetings, they have show and tell. So people see what other people are doing and thinking about. And I think that's probably the best way to find somebody to study with. There are no longer, that I know of, programs either in the United States or in England that are specifically about tapestry. There are people still in Canada like Murray Gibson who are teaching tapestry at tertiary, college level schools. But there's no reason not to write to people and say, I love your work. Is it possible? That's how I met Sylvia Hayden, and that's how things happened that I ended up in France.
Be brave. Be brave.
Be brave. Why not?
I know.
What do you
What
have
do you
to
got to lose?
Yeah, exactly.
Gail Valance would like to know, can you give some information about the yarns you like to use, both for the warp and the weft?
I would love to give you information, except I don't have any. I find yarn wherever I find it. I have recently found some Navajo wool warp. I use a cotton seine twine that comes in various weights. And I have webs around the corner from my house, essentially here in Northampton. And so I go in there and I just look at what they have and then I weave, but no, I'm sorry. There are times when I wish that I had a more consistent source and a more consistent look to my work and a more blah, blah, blah. And I don't. I just weave what I weave, and I look at my yarns and I go, okay, so what do I need to make sure for this? I have a huge collection now of black, white, and red.
Yeah,
And
I bet you do.
And I can tell you that white cotton is whiter than white wool, and white wool has a huge range of colors, but even white cotton, I've just been discussing this in twine, tends to yellow. And so that's a difficult one. And so people in the group, some of them have sent me some samples of things like linen and silk, which they feel, hold it better. I haven't yet written to Marcel Marois, but somebody reminded me that he was determined to find a very white, and she suspected he had, and I suspect he probably has too, so I'll ask him. But, I'm sorry, it's a good question and I have no satisfactory answer.
Ramona Abernathy Payne wants to know, what does a tapestry sampler look like?
There are two kinds of things. One is, I'm going to make this piece. I want to use these colors. What will these colors look like together? That was what happened with Leaf Heart. What will these colors look like together? And so I wove that, because woven yarn does not look the same as yarn sitting in your hand. The second thing a sampler could be is of particular techniques. In France, they had us using, making a sampler of various techniques, so why don't you try doing this? This is what the formula is, and then you'll see what you can do with it. So I would say those are the two things I can think of that are samplers.
Oh, okay. Okay. And it doesn't really matter the size, right?
No.
Okay.
It should be a size that you're comfortable weaving. It should be a size that is satisfactory. If you were to make something that was 1 inch by 1 inch, it would be more difficult to judge how the colors all work together. But, I would just say, do it, see what you can come up with, There's no particular formula for that.
Gail also wants to know, do you weave your tapestries from the back or the front?
Yes.
There you go, Gail. There's your answer.
Yes. It just depends. I've been weaving a lot of them from the front, but that's not the only way I weave them. And when I studied in Paris, I wove them from the back. And that to me is interesting, because when you weave from the back, you have a longer look to see what something looks like. You can always go around the loom and look and see what's going on. I was working on vertical warp looms, but you also can look through the warp, and then the warp is to the mirror and back again to the tapestry. And that's, so that's longer than just looking at it straight in front of you. And that's interesting. And there are certain techniques, Christine Laffer notwithstanding, who can do anything, that are easier to do if you do them from the back than if you do them from the front. So.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Double weft interlock, which is the very simple French word liure, L-I-U-R-E, is a way of interlocking areas so that if you have two colors, you can put them next to each other and there are no slits.
Okay. Okay. Now, this is from somebody who doesn't do tapestry, so I apologize ahead of time. When you're working on a piece, can you work on it from the front and then go, oh, I'm going to work in the back, or do you need to do the same thing all the way up?
No, you can do whatever you want, as long as you're consistent with where the ends are hanging down. I do remember going to an exhibition once. I've told this story a lot. And I saw this piece and I thought, what is wrong with this picture? And I went to the organizer and I said, that's a tapestry. You've hung it backwards, because all the threads were hanging down. And she said, but it's so much more interesting that way. I said, that may well be, but the threads are all, no.
Really? Oh, wow. The threads are hanging on. Oh, wow.
Yes. And I just felt very sorry for the person who wove it, because, it was clear that the right side of the tapestry was not anywhere near as interesting as the wrong side.
Oh, dear.
So anyways.
In which direction were the trees and the blue moon woven?
From the side.
Oh, really?
Yes. They were not woven from the bottom up. They were woven from the side.
Oh, okay. Good question, Char. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
Do you always work with a consistent weight of weft, or does it vary within a piece? And what is your main source of yarn for weft? Everybody wants to know about the yarn.
I do not always work with the same consistency of weft. And sometimes I am including techniques like, now I'm going completely blank on the word, doesn't matter.
Okay.
It just depends on what it is that I want to do. And sometimes I will be going over one and under one, and sometimes I'll be going over two and under two, so that you end up with different kinds of textures. And with different kinds of textures, you can use a fatter weft if you're going over 2 warp yarns and under 2 warp yarns. You know, so it's just, it just depends on what you're doing.
Do you work at, this is from Bonnie Berglund. Do you work at one piece at a time, or do you have several things going at once?
Several things going at once. And some pieces have been sitting on looms for a long time because I'm taking my time getting through them. But, you know, there someday I go buy this one piece at my studio and I pat it and I say, it's all right, sweetie, I'll get back to you, I promise. So
I love that. Pamela Sapetto says, do you have a school or a resource that you like for beginning tapestry weavers?
I think Rebecca Mezoff, my impression is, does an extremely good job. I know that Archie Brennan and Susan Martin Maffei put together what are not now CDs. I think it's now something that you can stream online, teaching tapestry. And Archie was brilliant and Susan is brilliant, so that they would be an extremely good resource, you know, to find out about things. There are all kinds of people teaching tapestry. I think that one of the goals in learning tapestry is to find people with whom you have a sense of connection, so that you can actually hear what they're saying and feel like doing what they suggest, and pay attention to how they talk about things and make them work. So
do you teach?
Badly, apparently. I can give talks. I'm good at that. I'm good at interesting people and how, you know, I'm thinking about things and offering them a chance to see things. That, by the way, is, I would say, one of the most important lessons I learned at Gobelins, the ability to see what it was that I was doing and what goes on there. But I will never forget teaching a tapestry workshop, and there was a woman in it who had been longing forever to learn tapestry, and she dropped out after 2 classes. And I just thought, you know, and I felt bad because I thought I should have been able to work with that person and make her dreams come true, and I could not. And I
You're a
was
little harsh on yourself.
Well, I just felt bad, you know.
No, I understand, but
no.
could have been extenuating circumstance. I mean, you're doing beautifully here. I mean, I can't imagine you not being a good teacher.
But I'm talking about stuff. I'm not saying do it like this, not like that. You know, I'm giving people the chance to think about things. I'm giving people the chance to consider what matters to them. I'm not saying the formula works like this and not like that. You know, so it's all, it just depends.
Karen LeBlanc wants to know, do you work on other forms of weaving or looms, such as a floor loom or a multi harness loom?
When the pandemic hit, I set up a floor loom I have and made scarves, and had the nicest time making those scarves, because that was about color and that was about seeing what happened when the yarns interlaced with each other. So I had a wonderful time, and I would happily, you know, make more scarves. You know, it was fun.
Oh, we're getting into the nitty gritty here now. How many looms do you have and what sizes are they?
I have a lot of looms, and the biggest one is probably about 6 feet wide. It's one that I got in France. I have another one that's about, or maybe it's 8 feet wide. I have one that's about 5 feet wide. I have a few of the travel looms. I have a few of the of other small frame looms. And I have this one floor loom that's, I think, like 24 or 30 inches wide that Julia Mitchell gave me, which was extremely lovely of her. So, you know, it's fun because you can set things up and just wait at them when you go by to work on something else. And I now have I don't have my studio in my house, but there's somebody living at the studio. So getting there becomes a logistic thing. Are you going to be there? Do I need to wear the mask? What's going on today? What's your schedule? But when I get there, there are looms there. But now I have 3 looms upstairs. And so I can go into that room and weave, and it's very nice.
Oh, okay. Mostly vertical loom, it sounds like.
One of those is the horizontal loom that I made the scarves on, but
Okay.
the other 2 are vertical looms, one of which is a travel loom.
Let's see. This is Kathy Mayer, Laura Berlage from Arendelle Tapestry Studio in Hayward, Wisconsin, teaches a series of classes online. Oh, she's giving people ideas about classes. She can also do the videos. Thank you, Kathy. Good information.
Great.
Most of these, I think we answered along the way. So if you had to take a different course, go a different direction, you for some reason you can't weave anymore, what do you think you would do?
When I used to only weave, I felt like I wasn't giving my brain any kind of exercise, because a lot of what I did was very instinctive. And when I used to only write, I felt like I was missing something, that I was stuck in my head, and that wasn't a good thing. So I think that my writing continues to be one of the things that engages my imagination in a particular way, and that the weaving engages my imagination in a different way. So it's clear that I would have to find something that I would be able to do that would engage my imagination in a way different from what happens when I write. And I don't know what that would be. I'm a lousy seamstress. I never learned to crochet in spite of my mother and grandmother. When I knit, I hold the needle so hard that everything felts, and that's not a good thing. One of my dearest friends is Beth Beatty, who's a world-class felter. And so maybe I would start to try to do some felting, because I already do it when I'm knitting, and that's not intentional, but maybe that tells me something that I want to learn. So we'll see.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, I'm excited that you're going to do another book, because if you haven't seen this book, go get a copy, go look at it. It's just eye candy. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, and so nicely chosen. There's just a little bit of everybody in that book. And
the other thing to think about with a book like that, and I try to say this, is that you can go through that book and go, why did she put that here? I wouldn't have put that here. I would have put that in this other place. To which my answer is, go to it. Great, wonder, these are my ideas. My ideas are not the only ideas. Just have a good time and come up with your own point of view. It's very helpful to discover that you have a point of view.
yes, it is.
So,
Well, thank you so much for being on here today. We are so appreciative of you taking your time and sharing about you and your work. And I want to encourage people to go to your website and take a look at more of your work. It's hawleystreet.com. We got the website up here, and you can learn a lot more about Micala Sidore and her work. And again, we thank you so much for being here today, Micala.
well, I appreciate the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
And we're so excited with Schiffer. Not only did they do a wonderful thing by publishing this gorgeous book, but you're going to get an opportunity to get one of them free. They're going to give away two books of hers. Be sure you go to the chat. Excuse me. The link is in chat. You have to use the link. So go through the chat and click on the link, and you can enter to win one of the two books that Schiffer is going to give away. And if you're looking for any kind of a fiber book, Schiffer is your source. They are the publishers for fiber these days. They're wonderful. They give new artists a leg up, and they're open to new ideas. So, and we will see them at Convergence. They will be there. So be sure you stop by and see them at Convergence. If you would like to sponsor Textiles and Tea, or your guild or your business, please go to our website and get more information about sponsoring Textiles and Tea. If you appreciate these programs and like to see more programming happen, please support HTA by either joining or donating, or both, and we continue the different programming that we have available. If you've missed any of the episodes, you can watch them on Facebook. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to have an account. You can just go in and watch the different episodes. We're also putting them on YouTube, and I encourage you to register, to subscribe to the HGA YouTube page, because when they are uploaded, then you'll get a notice that there's a new one up and you can watch it there. We have some information about the hotels at Convergence. We have some beautiful hotels in downtown Knoxville. They're just gorgeous. We've got the Crown Plaza. They have a shuttle, takes you right to the door. I kind of like that idea. At the end of the day, my feet don't want to walk anymore. We have the Hyatt Place, and that's also just across the street, about a block and a half, maybe 2 blocks up. It has Starbucks, so it's my favorite. And then we also have the Cumberland House. You cross over the river. It's a beautiful view, and you're, again, about 2 blocks away. And there's a trolley in Knoxville. This is so much fun, and it's so handy. It goes all over downtown by the convention center out to the university. You can travel all around Knoxville. You just hop on and off. It's free. You can get this map and see where it goes. It'll take you up to the marketplace. There's a street downtown Knoxville that's blocked off, and it's shops and restaurants and music. It's a wonderful place, and you can get there. We're only a few blocks away from the convention center. We have lots of events at Convergence: Sheep to Shawl, Strut Your Stuff Fashion Show, Thread Talks, Shuttle Race, Meet and Greet booths, and an open portfolio. You can sign up for all of these still. We're still looking for Sheep to Shawl teams. Come on, you guys, you can do this. A little spinning, a little weaving, strut your stuff. Be sure you bring your things to Convergence. We want to see. We're looking for people for Thread Talks. Do you have a concept, an idea that you think other fibers would like to hear about? Sign up and let's hear about it. The shuttle races, if you don't know about the shuttle race, it's great. You can build your own little shuttle and race it down the track. It's too much fun. Meet and greet booths, we're waiting for folks to sign up for that too, and the open portfolio. If you have any questions about any of this, it's on the website under Convergence, or you can give us a call. Again, thank you all so much for being here today. It's been a wonderful talk with Micala. Thank you so much for being here. Next week, we have Rabbit Goody. Maybe we'll figure out why Rabbit. That's an interesting name. So we hope you'll join us next Tuesday for Textiles and Tea. Have a great week. Happy tea.